Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our session. This is a virtual information session titled Disaster Management in the Era of Climate Change. We're so excited to welcome you today. We are going to get started in the next minute. We're just going to allow some of our participants to join and allow them a little bit more time to join the webinar. So what I always like to do while we're waiting for a couple more people to join is I love to do a kind of an exercise just to make sure everybody can hear me well, which is great. In fact, now I'm looking at the participants and I'm seeing some names I recognize, but which is wonderful. If you want to go ahead, we're going to be opening up the chat box shortly for the mind mapping exercise. But while we're waiting for a couple more people to join us, if everybody wants to type in the Q&A where they are joining us from. So the city, state, country with which they're joining us from, that would be wonderful. This event is co-sponsored by the Columbia Global Center Rio, which we're always thrilled to partner with them. We love to see also the Brazil representation. I know quite a few of you guys are joining us from Brazil. So again, welcome. Sao Paulo, welcome. Thank you, Luisa. If anybody else wants to share where they are located. Interestingly, we had a large number of students from around the world join, and quite a few in the US. So feel free to type in the Q&A box where you're joining us from. Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Welcome, Mia. Excellent. I'm so glad that you're able to make it. And Maria, one of our colleagues, is from Brazil and the USA, of course. Welcome, Maria. So glad you can make it. All right, excellent. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, welcome to our virtual info session on disaster management in the era of climate change. We have a really wonderful guest speaker, Jeffrey Schlegelmilch, who will be joining us shortly to perform a really interesting mind mapping exercise that I hope all of you can actively participate in. Participation is key, so using that chat box is key. And I definitely want to make sure that chat box is activated now to allow for that participation. Just to briefly go over the agenda, again, we're going to go over disaster management in the era of climate crisis. We're going to perform a mind mapping exercise. That's definitely going to take around the first 15 to 20 minutes of our session. And then we're going to dive deep into the different degree program offerings here at Columbia Climate School, including our MA Climate and Society and the MS in Climate program. We'll also touch on financial aid and the application process, and finally conclude with professional learning opportunities. Also joining us today is Laurel Zaimashihi, who's the Assistant Director of K-12 and Continuing Education Opportunities at Columbia Climate School. And for those of you joining us that may not necessarily be interested in a degree program, but interested in flexible virtual opportunities that you can directly take and apply to your careers, Laurel's going to have some interesting opportunities to share with you. Joining also today is Damaris Diaz. Damaris is Assistant Director of Enrollment Management here at Columbia Climate School, and she will be assisting with the Q&A function. So now, without further ado, what I'd like to go ahead and do is introduce our guest speaker, Professor Jeffrey Schlegelmilch is the director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness here at Columbia Climate School and also an adjunct associate professor at the Climate School. Jeff is, I always like to emphasize, the chief architect of our newly launched Advanced Certificate in Climate and Disaster Management, which is a certificate embedded within the MS in Climate program. We'll definitely discuss that later. He also oversees the projects related to the practice and policy of disaster preparedness. His areas of expertise include public health preparedness, community resilience, and the integration of private and public sector capabilities. I will now allow Jeff to further discuss how effective disaster management strategies can mitigate risk, enhance community resilience, and support sustainable development. And again, the chat box is being purposely left open today for this really dynamic mind mapping exercise, but the critical key here is for you to participate. So without further ado, welcome, Jeff.
Hey everyone, really great to see folks participating. Love to see the interest in a topic so important as the work we're doing here at the Climate School, and of course, always happy to talk about some of the work that I'm involved with. So here are a couple of graphics here. Here are some things that from the insurance industry that I think paints the picture that we already know, right? We are seeing disasters impact more lives, more livelihoods. I know many of us have had direct experiences with disasters or loved ones affected by disasters. I was actually just a few months ago in Porto Alegre in Brazil as part of the private sector engagement with some of the recovery from the historic flooding there. And so unfortunately, this is just a bigger and bigger part of the conversation and something. But the good news here is that of these aspects, there's a lot that we can do about it. There are ways that we can sort of prevent this in the future and facilitate stronger and better recovery. So one of the things I like to share with some of the data here is if you look at the bottom left-hand side, this is insured losses. So this is biased towards wealthier areas where things cost more. But it does show, you do see the vast majority of losses on the insurance side globally are coming from climate-related hazards, right? Storms, flooding, drought, wildfires, things that have a climate element to it. But then you see this, the third place here, earthquakes. Earthquakes have been a really big driver of losses as well, and not so linked with climate, certainly with earth science and other aspects that we teach. And what this tells us too is that it's not all climate change. It's also societal development, how we're building our communities and how we're supporting each other sort of through that process and either building resilience or moving away from it. I should say too, this data is 2022. It does not include the 2023 Turkey earthquake in the Hatay region, which is considered, I believe it's the most expensive since the Haiti earthquake in 2010. But again, all of this just to show that this is a bigger part of really all of the different aspects of civil society and all of the different sectors that it touches. So we're going to go to the next slide. And Damaris, we can go ahead and open up the chat. So if you don't have access to the chat, you should momentarily. So this is an exercise I typically do in one of my classes on climate change and disaster management. And if you can't read it, that's okay. But essentially what we do is we go through and we just start talking about kind of what are the different aspects of sustainable development and disaster management and climate change and disaster management. Who do we need to work with? What matters in terms of what we do? So what I'm going to do is actually, Alfred, if you can stop sharing, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to spend a little bit of time here, and I'm going to ask all of you. So for right now, there's no right or wrong answer, but to actually start sharing in the chat sort of your thoughts. When we think about disasters, when we think about society, what matters with climate change and disaster? What do we need to know? Who do we need to work with? So go ahead and put that in the chat. Great. Oh, sorry, I thought that was one of the answers. Yes, please. And please go ahead and put these in the chat. I will say in my class, 20% of your grade is participation. So this is very important here. So please, please share some ideas in the chat here in terms of when we're talking about climate change and disaster management. What are we thinking about? What are we worried about? I'll give folks a minute to get a couple of things in the chat. And maybe I'll ask Laurel, Alfred, and Damaris if you guys want to jump in a little bit too, in terms of what are we looking at? Like, what are your thoughts as well too? Oh, here we go. We're cooking. Okay, so we have things like, so I'm going to call this timeliness. Timeliness, I'm going to assume of the response here, right? Great point here. Visibility, awareness. I'm going to put in visibility. Visibility. I'm going to go across with visibility as well too. Maybe there's things, right? Like media coverage. Okay, we're worried about livelihoods. Economics, right? We have livelihoods. Live. Let's see how well I can spell. Already love the participation. Y'all are going to be great students in my class. Okay.
Rocks.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about community. I'm going to talk about equity. So equity, great one. Community. There's this community engagement piece. This one's probably going to come across in a lot of them, right? The response systems are going to need community engagement. For awareness, we're going to need community engagement. For economics, we're going to need community engagement. Integration of public and private. Public-private partnerships. Did I miss any? Worried about livelihoods, community, social vulnerabilities. Here we go. Social vulnerability, human rights. Really important piece. There's the one I was waiting on. Infrastructure, right? I'm going to call this the built environment. We actually have a great partnership with our colleagues in the School of Engineering for a lot of the programming as well, too, to really bring in some of that built environment. Keep it coming. The more, the better. More is more here, infrastructure. And you can see as you're sort of thinking, oh, regulations. All right, so we're going to call this, let's call this the, let's just go with regulation. Regulation, information management. So we're going to put this in here as well, too, under awareness, information. Oops, did I lose something? I didn't. Okay. Information. Information. Countering disinformation, right? This is something we've come up with a lot more. We've got our response systems. So we have our disaster management systems, emergency management systems, great points. Let's talk a little bit. So I see communications, and I'm thinking about that a couple of different ways. Maybe I'll delete it here. And under awareness, I'm going to put in two types of communication. Notification and also communication. Maybe under communication, right? And so we'll put this under some of the actually let's do it. I think risk communication. Okay. Where are we at here? Oh, even more coming. Great. So we can already start to see a picture starting to be painted here. What else are we thinking of? So we have equity. So we have a lot of look at sort of how communities, I'm going to just add a little bit of shading here. Community impacts equity, right? Within that, we have community engagement as a component, social vulnerability, human rights. I know we're adding community engagement across a lot of these. We have public-private partnerships. We have these emergency response systems, the timeliness of information, community engagement, emergency management systems. We have this whole communications cluster here of awareness, things like that. Environment is a really great one here in terms of let's talk about environment a little bit more, environment and regulation, right? I'm going to read into this a little bit. Oh, here we go, biodiversity. Biodiversity. We have food security. Oh, investigation. Yeah. I'm going to put that under regulation. But correct me if I'm incorrect here, because I'm thinking of this like post-disaster investigation into causes and after actions in terms of how that went, which can also be part of kind of a healthy response system, right? What else do folks think? Are we missing some things here? We have the economy, we have food security. I'll add into here a few other things like agriculture, food supply chains, right? We have actually a phenomenal group of experts on food security who are building out a parallel certificate program. So coming into the MS program, we'll actually have through Jess Fonzo and Ruth DeFries and others opportunities to also take electives and take other courses in that. Economics, we have some great connections with some of the business school as well as the School of International Public Affairs, and bringing in sort of joint faculty to help educate on some of that. As I mentioned, the built environment with the engineering school and some of the other schools. What do we have here? Adaptation and resilience. Love it. I'm going to put that here under built environment. You know what? I'm going to put this under a lot of these. Adaptation and resilience, right? Because this is something that is going to go under a lot of them. So when we think of adaptation and resilience, a lot of the definitions stem from the built environment, right? But there's a whole lot coming out of the fields of social vulnerability. In schools of sociology, we teach a lot of that and lean on a lot of that. And we actually have some amazing courses on environmental justice and social justice coming on as part of the core of the work that we're doing. Disease prevention and management. So I started my career in public health. Public. I'm gonna call this health and medical, and I'm gonna add into here this kind of disease. And actually, I was just giving a lecture earlier today for a school of nursing on uh, vulnerable populations and disasters. And some of the largest impacts that we see outside of the direct impacts are the indirect impacts on some of these issues related to chronic conditions that come in the aftermath and some of the stressors and a lot of things that we can do. We have here desertification. We'll put that under environment. I think we have a whole like kind of social justice lens here that I see here. And so with reparations, I'm going to add reparations. And I think we see a lot of this discussion that we talk about in our classes as well too, with things like loss and damage funds that we're seeing at COP this year, that we have a number of folks attending, that we have a number of folks essentially being part of those negotiations and being part of those discussions. I think this year for COP and the G20, of course, in Brazil, these will be some of the most formative years for these ideas like adaptation funding and loss and damage. I'm going to put displacement a few places because displacement, because there's a huge social justice lens to this as well too. But I'm actually going to add a whole new branch here, and I'm going to move it up. Can I move it up here? Yes, I'm going to move it up here for symmetry, and I'm going to talk about climate migration. So we actually have a whole climate migration network that we have major participation here. And we have a couple of centers. I was just meeting earlier with Alex DeSherbanen, who leads one of our information centers. He leads one of these networks focused on climate migration. We actually worry about this as one of the biggest impacts of increase in temperatures and things like that. Increase in wet bulb temperatures and the impacts to things that could drive climate migration. We have natural resource management. My class is usually earlier in the day. I'd like to say that I type better and quicker, but the truth is I don't. This is as good as I get.
You're
Okay.
doing phenomenally, Jeff. I have to say, this is brilliant.
No, all good. Appreciate the input. There's another area, other things we want to mention here. So we do sort of have, we haven't gotten into, so regulation is another great one. So we actually have a strong connections with the law school, right? With the Sabin Center for Climate Law and also with the Center for Sustainable Investment. So we have some of these public-private partnerships. We have some folks on sustainable investment. We have some of the adaptation financing. right? Oh, here we go. This is the one, Richard. You are reading my mind. That's the one I was looking for, national security. Okay, national security, purple. We're gonna make it purple because that is the default color for however many we've made. National security, and I'm gonna pull in there we go. Military involvement, and civil order. So we actually do see this in a lot of intelligence estimates and national security estimates, the role of this. We actually see this blending over into some of the other coursework we do, even on energy. Energy security is a major piece. I should mention too, on the food security, I mentioned Jess and Ruth also. Michael Puma does a lot of work in terms of this in his group with CCSR, which that I shouldn't use acronyms, but I can't remember what it stands for. But they do a lot of great work with NASA, and he's incoming on the full faculty along with myself. Elio, managing price gouging, of course, price gouging. Great. How are we doing on time? We're pretty good. So, any other thoughts? Anything we're really missing here? Anything else we want to talk about?
You're good, Jeff. You're great on time.
Great. Awesome. Others that folks are saying there's one other piece that is not explicitly on here that I'd love to mention that we talk a lot about and sort of get a lot of input on. I'll give a hint. It's very big in the US right now because we have a very important day coming up next week. Ooh, mandated evacuations. That's a great point. I'm going to put this in here. We do not have mandated evacuations coming up next week. No, I know that that wasn't in response to that. I hope we don't have it next week. Elections, there we go, Alfred, mandated evacuations. So I'm going to put in here the politics. Let's call it the political economy. This becomes a really important piece. We'll put it in the regulation. I was actually just at a presentation 2 hours ago from one of our postdocs talking about, don't worry about the spelling. I grade on participation, not spelling, so you're all set. I can't be a hypocrite. But and the presentation was actually talking about how, we have some of these things that the science is driving in the insurance industry, but there's an electoral component. There are portions of that sort of value chain where people are in elected positions or they are in appointed positions. And so there are political aspects to this, is that we may know in the long run it's more valuable to increase insurance rates to make sure that homes can be covered in the event of a loss, but there's a short-term disincentive for doing that. This is all just a little bit of a snapshot in terms of saying that, the politics plays a big role. We've seen this in COVID. We see it in every disaster. And so we spend some time trying to understand all of this. Okay, last call. Any other thoughts? And for those kind of just joining, thinking about climate change and disaster management, what are some of the different things that matter or don't matter? I should say or don't matter. What are the things that matter? Nothing doesn't matter, right? Do we miss anything? So this is the point that I like to land on in doing all of this. When we train in emergency management, we train on those systems. When we train in community organizing, we train in that. When we train, there's a regulatory component. This is all just to say that, part of the creation of this degree program is based on this idea, not this idea, this truth that you've illustrated with the comments that you've given here today, is that disasters touch every part of society. Everybody owns part of it. Nobody owns all of it. And so if you're asking yourself, I see that disasters are important. I'm not really sure how I fit in. I can say there's a role for you. And I think one of the things that I'm really proud of with the program as we built it is we do have some folks coming through who end up in the emergency management world and as full-time disaster management professionals. We absolutely do, but the majority of our students that come through will go off into finance. We'll go off and work in food systems. We'll work for groups like the UN. Will work in their government agencies in the US or in their home agencies. Will work in financial firms and the nonprofit sector and groups providing humanitarian aid. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to bring us back to the slides. And then Alfred, we could go to the next one. But as we think about sort of around all these different branches, all of these different things, this concept of resilience, and we can go to the next one, is at the intersection. So this is a graphic I like to share. It was at a conference on urban resilience, but we can take away the word urban and it's essentially the same thing. And this looks an awful lot like what you just provided, right? This looks a lot like the information you just gave me. Now, what they did, that really, really small font that you can't read, those are citations. So what this group, led by Dr. Lorenzo Trellari in Spain, did was they did a literature review. They did a more empirically rigorous version of what we just did and looked at, okay, when people are talking about resilience, what do they mean? And it turns out we all mean something a little bit different. We all mean it sort of based on the lens through which we're operating. If you're a civil engineer, you're looking at it from the built environment. If you're a lawyer, you're looking at it from a legal or regulatory framework, right? Um, so again, this is all sort of a long way of sort of coming down to this is that the experience of resilience, the change that occurs at this intersection, and we all are sort of pointed towards that center in the work that we do. And one of the and really at the core of the programs that we offer is providing a holistic view, understanding how you fit in with that work. So as you go in with your career, you are able to sort of understand how to work with, how to navigate, and how all of these different principles come together. So with that, thank you so much for all of the participation in the chat. This was really great. We've got a great kind of picture here of things that have happened, and I'll hand it back to Alfred, and we'll go through the programs in a little bit more detail.
Awesome. Hey, Jeff, thank you so much. This was brilliant. And I genuinely enjoyed the mind mapping exercise. So, and I think this brings us right now into Columbia Climate School, its history and its ethos. And um, what this entire exercise was showing was just how interdisciplinary climate has to be in order to address the crisis, all the different constituents that have to get involved. I think this was the perfect exercise. So, just to give everybody a little bit of anchored understanding and background on the climate school, let's first just briefly discuss Columbia University itself. Columbia University is a major research institution. It's the fifth oldest university here in the United States, the oldest in the state of New York. When people think of Columbia University, it is considered kind of a blueprint of research universities. Underneath the name Columbia University are over 20 different schools, the majority of them being professional graduate schools. And we at the Climate School is the newest addition to the overarching university itself. We were announced in 2020, launched in 2021, and kind of our mission is that the world requires knowledgeable leaders to work with business, communities, governments, and civil society to address the climate crisis. Columbia Climate School's graduate degree programs and other learning opportunities provide an interdisciplinary knowledge base for climate leaders with diverse interests and backgrounds. And what this slideshow also highlights is the fact that, we have a multiple campus footprint, what I like to say. So in the lower right corner, I would say that's our origin story at the Climate School. We always say the Climate School is the newest school, but that's not the full story. We actually have a long-standing history at the university itself with Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. And that's in the lower right corner. That's a 189-acre research campus where many of our research centers are based today. It has, again, a 75-year history. It's ranked the #1 Earth and Environmental Science research center here in the US. And in terms of our background in climate, we have a very kind of deep pool of climate scientists that have been working at Columbia University. In fact, the first time the term global warming was used in a research paper, that was by a Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory faculty member in the 1970s. So again, climate and Columbia Climate School has a long-standing history. Then the two left-hand photographs, one being Morningside Heights, the other being the Manhattanville campus, just to display that we have classes that are on classes at both Morningside, which is our traditional Columbia University campus, as well as Manhattanville, which is just 10 blocks north of the traditional main campus. In terms of the student profile, like who studies at Columbia Climate School, right now we have a 1-degree program that falls directly under the school. That's the MA Climate and Society program. There's just over 120 students enrolled, and it's a very diverse audience. About 44% of the students are international, representing 27 different countries of citizenship. We have 18 different states represented among our domestic students. And another really interesting data point is that 15% of the students we classify as first generation college students, or the first in their family to attend college or university. The average age in our program is 26 years old. And then also, we like to highlight the diverse makeup of academic background. So, about 1/3 of the students that enter our climate school programs, or I should say program right now, have STEM backgrounds, so environmental scientists or engineering. And then about 2/3 of the students are coming to the program with social science backgrounds, and those could be including political science, economics, anthropology, urban planning. We also have a number of students with business backgrounds that we lump into that social science group. So a number of students with undergraduate finance majors entering the climate school. In terms of the degree programs I lightly referenced, we have an MA in Climate and Society program and an MS in Climate. The MS in Climate is where I think Jeff was referencing quite a bit. We're most excited. This is the newest program within the portfolio, and this is the program that has advanced certificates embedded within, including the Advanced Certificate in Disaster Management, which we are going to touch on. But to give you kind of a high-level overview of the difference between these two programs, the MS in Climate, which is just announced and will be and is accepting applications for fall 2025, that's a 50-credit program. The MA in Climate and Society, which has had a longstanding history here at Columbia University, is a 34-credit program. In terms of length, the MS in Climate is a 4-semester, 21-month program. Again, that's going to allow you to dive deeper into climate, dive deeper into specific topics within climate, like disaster management. And then the MA in Climate and Society program is a 3-semester or 12-month program. In terms of enrollment plans, the MS in Climate is strictly for full-time students. The MA Climate and Society program allows both full-time as well as part-time. And then in terms of practical experience, the MS in Climate certainly distinguishes itself in that it has an internship embedded within it between the first and second year of the program, as well as a capstone. And then the MA Climate Society strictly has a capstone. And most importantly, for those of you joining that are international students or students that are planning on attending the program under STEM designation, both of these degree programs are STEM designated, which allows you to have an additional 2 years of OPT. So you have potentially remaining in the US for 3 years working following completion of the MA program or the MS program. So let me just now touch on the MA in Climate and Society. This is a 34-credit program, as we mentioned. It's interdisciplinary, and it's to train professionals and academics to understand and address the impacts of climate variability and change on society and the environment. Through classes and research, students gain knowledge in physical and social sciences and the humanities as they relate to climate. In fact, Jeff has taught for several years with this student audience within the MA Climate and Society program, and specifically many of the disaster management courses that are offered as electives, soon to be in the advanced certificate, but also as electives for MA Climate and Society students. I mentioned that it's a 3-semester program. This is to just kind of give you an aerial view of what that looks like. You always begin the program in the fall. You start with the climate core. The spring will continue with the climate core and then dive into the elective journey. And then the summer semester, you will wrap up with the electives along with a capstone workshop. And I'm going to talk about capstones shortly. Now I'll just briefly transition to the MS in Climate. Again, I want to emphasize this is the newest program within Columbia Climate School. We just announced that I believe it was September 23rd. Applications are open, and this is a 2-year, 50-credit-hour professional degree program. We're classifying this as our flagship degree that gives graduates from diverse backgrounds and in-depth training in specific areas of climate expertise and prepares them for to become climate leaders at the community, state, national, and international levels. To see an aerial view of the MS in Climate program, again, this is going to be a 4-semester sequence. You're going to say, but Alfred, there's 5 semesters listed there. The summer semester is the internship semester, and that is truly, there's no tuition associated with that semester, but there is a required internships component. So you'll begin in the fall semester with the climate core. You'll then continue in the spring semester And with the climate core and your electives and also your certificate requirement, which I will be touching on in more detail shortly, you'll also continue with the summer internship. And again, that's a distinguishing characteristic and a phenomenal applied learning experience. And then in the fall semester, you have the climate core continuation, the electives, the certificate again. And in the spring, you are wrapping up with your certificate requirements and then a capstone experience. I keep referencing the climate core, and I think it's really important to dive deeper into this. So a signature of a Columbia Climate School education is the idea of the climate core. It's a set of courses that are to train you regardless of your industry or sector that you plan to work in. We feel that these are a core set of courses that every single climate professional must have. Majority of the climate core is overlapping with one another between the MA and MS. So let me touch on this briefly. During Jeff's mind mapping exercise, I think climate justice was referenced, which is something that we all need to be anchored in. So that's going to be embedded within the climate core, climate justice theory, practice, and policy. We have to recognize that certain communities are far more negatively impacted by the climate crisis versus others, and we have to have an understanding of that. We also have a course titled The History of the Climate Crisis. This is going to be a course exclusively for students interested in the MA program. And then a course that's across programs includes climate change mitigation and climate change adaptation. These are the two pillars of addressing the climate crisis. We also have a dynamics of climate variability and change course. This class is, I always like to say, is the physics behind the climate crisis. So whenever somebody stops you on the street and says, do you believe in climate change? And your response should always be, yes, I believe in climate change. If they say, why do you believe in it? This dynamics course is going to give you the why. And it's going to allow you to communicate that why with various constituents, whether you're speaking to a scientist or a policy analyst, or let's say in a K-12 setting. The dynamics course is going to teach you the science behind climate change and give you that why. We also have a quantitative models for climate application course. This is going to be largely climate data. And we always have to emphasize that data is king, data is key throughout industries and sectors. Being able to understand the data, make decisions based on the data, tell a story with the data is really critical. And same thing goes when it comes to climate. So this course is going to be climate data and specifically using the computer program language R. And then the final course listed there, this is exclusively for the MS in climate students, there's going to be a second quantitative methods course. And that course is going to be dependent upon the advanced certificate with which you choose. So transitioning back to exclusively discussing the MS in climate program, within the MS in climate, one of the most significant distinguishing characteristics between the MA and the MS is an embedded 18 credit hour advanced certificate. One thing I like to know as a part of the application process is the admissions committee, which are faculty members. The admissions committee wanted to make sure and emphasize that students were still exploratory when applying to the MS in climate program. So I want to stress that you're not locking yourself into an advanced certificate at the time of the admissions application. You're going to indicate the advanced certificate of interest. You actually don't officially declare the advanced certificate until the end of your first fall semester. But we are offering 3 distinct advanced certificates to choose from. The first one being Climate Systems Analytics, which provides the critical skills and understanding to interpret and analyze climate and weather data, understand climate model predictions and projections, assess climate-related risks to human and natural systems, and develop strategies for mitigating these effects. I'll then touch on climate and food systems because I'm going to save the best for last with Jeff being here. So climate and food systems, Jeff gave a shout out to Professor Jess Spanzo, who's phenomenal. This advanced certificate, of course, focuses on the intersection of climate with food systems, food production, and human livelihood. Students learn how to apply evidence-based approaches to food system transformation, gaining critical skills and knowledge for professional pathways in this emerging field. And then finally, last but not least, climate and disaster management. Certainly, I think one of the most, if not the most critical aspect when it comes to addressing the climate crisis, disaster management provides students with the foundational knowledge and skills needed to conduct and apply research in various intersecting disciplines relevant to managing disasters. The mind mapping exercise was a beautiful synthesis of this. Students will gain new insights into disaster management, particularly in relation to preparedness, response, recovery, and long-term resilience best practices. I'm just now throwing up this slide on the specific advanced certificate in disaster management. As we noted, it is an 18 credit certificate. And in that 18 credits, forgive me, 12 of those credits are going to be identified for you. These are the, if you will, the core courses within the advanced certificate. It's climate change and disaster management. In fact, Jeff is your professor within that course. We also have building equitable community partnerships in disaster risk management, applied disaster research methods, and then finally post-disaster recovery, a focus on housing and economic sectors. Those are the required courses. And then we have selective courses or 2 additional courses that you can complete. And one thing Jeff wanted me to emphasize, and I'll pause here and also allow Jeff to add some more color, is that there's that this is just a selection of possibilities. So, you know, financing disaster, public, private, nonprofit spending on the disaster cycle, disaster communications and leadership. These are 2 courses within the climate school that would be offered. And then we have several courses through the cross-registration journey that you could pursue within the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, the School of International and Public Affairs, and the School of Professional Studies. But let me pause there. Jeff, would you like to add anything else as it relates to the certificate in disaster management?
Sure, and I actually was able to upload the mind map to the chat, so you can print that out, put it on your refrigerator. So a little bit of just sort of some rapid evidence of what we've done. But no, just to say too that yeah, I think really what we're looking at is understanding people are going into a lot of different fields. I'll say too that within the courses, and I know this is done across really all of the different areas of focus in the advanced certificates, but I can speak most in detail about the one that I'm most heavily involved in, the disaster courses. We build these courses and we build these assignments around work that we have to do every day. So in addition to the educational mission of the climate school, we have a lot of centers like the one that I run, the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, where we're out there consulting with groups in civil society, working with private sector partners, working in the aftermath of disasters. And so what we try to do within the courses is also sort of create outputs. So we have group negotiations where you're taking different positions on a resilience initiative where you have different interests that are competing against each other. We have outputs that are based on the type of summaries that oftentimes, like if we're have a resilience initiative and we need to justify it to a homeowner versus an elected official versus a private sector partner, we try to build things through case studies of examples and actually outputs, assignments that are reflective of the type of work that we do every day. So to really sort of take that amazing knowledge you gather in the core and then ultimately get it to a point on how do you translate that into impacts and work products that you would give to folks either as research or trainings or policy recommendations. And as Alfred mentioned, we're continuing to kind of build electives within the climate school, but also, Columbia University is just this amazing ecosystem of thought leadership and and research. And so there are other courses offered through partners at School of Professional Studies, School of International and Public Affairs, and elsewhere that may be relevant. And so we try to offer a little bit of flexibility there too, that if there's something that is really, really important to where you're going to take your career and you feel like it's a really good fit, that we're able to accommodate that and make sure that you're able to take the core and then really take that in the direction that is most in service to your career goals and educational goals.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff. So I also want to, again, emphasize that throughout Columbia Climate School's graduate education, there's always applied learning opportunities, either through case-based learning, applied climate seminars, and then, of course, the summer internship and capstone. I also want to emphasize that we have some phenomenal electives. You'll see electives are a part of both degree programs, especially the MS in climate, of course. I started at Columbia Climate School in March of 2022, and at the time we only had 3 electives because it was such a new school. Now we have over 20 different electives, and they really span across topics as it relates to climate change, whether it's politics of climate in Asia, climate mobility, climate change law and policy. Jeff gave a shout out to the Sabin Center. So again, really, really dynamic electives that are being offered, and only more electives being offered each and every year. And this is just a great point I like to plug. And in fact, this is a nice shout out also when Laurel talks about the professional learning opportunities. But let me just share climate finance elective. So our staff here, the staff that are specifically looking at the curriculum, they're very thoughtful when it comes to pairing electives with one another and the introduction of new electives. So for example, this semester, we are pairing two different electives that complement one another, and a lot of students find value in taking them together. One is financing renewable energy, and this course will examine the key ingredients necessary to finance a renewable project, to make it economic, and including exploring different forms of capital available to successfully finance the project, along with analyzing the revenue models for renewable investors. I always like to say that financing renewable energy, think of this as the private sector. That's the lens when you're thinking about climate finance from that private sector. But then we have a course that's complementing it, climate policy and investment. Remember, the majority of the capital is going to be coming from the public sector for renewable energy. So the policies that have to fall behind it. So this course explores the many interrelated challenges to investing in the energy transition, to see why the big picture is important for really understanding policies or practices at a granular level. Students will understand the importance of policy frameworks to guide incentives and enable and structure critical investments for the energy transition. So again, I just like to highlight that we're very thoughtful about complementing electives with one another as well. And as Jeff touched on, within the advanced certificates, we're going to encourage cross-registration. Topics within disaster are taught within multiple professional schools, but topics and their intersections with climate in general are taught within multiple schools. And we encourage our students to explore and cross-register. That's a huge value of being a member of the Columbia University community. So we've had students cross-register at Columbia Engineering, the School of International and Public Affairs, Columbia Law School. We have partner programs at the School of Professional Studies in Sustainability Management and Sustainability Science. The Mailman School of Public Health, as Jeff is origin story within disaster management relates to public health, and we love our climate students with that public health lens. There's certainly opportunities there as well. I now want to briefly touch on career resources. We have a really robust career management office. They host employer information sessions, resume and cover letters, kind of one-on-one appointments, alumni mentorship program, which is phenomenal across our partner programs at Columbia University. We have an alumni mentorship program that will connect you with a specific alumni in the industry or sector that you're targeting. We also have some great sustainability skills seminars, an all-Ivy environmental and sustainable development career fair that we host every February, and an exclusive job board. So when you're thinking about post-degree, what does that look like? Well, our alumni work across industries and sectors. We have students at the World Bank, McKinsey, Boston Consulting Group. We also have students in local governments like the City of Seattle, the City of Los Angeles, the Environmental Protection Agency. We also have many students at the United Nations. So it really does run the gamut. Climate is interdisciplinary, and there's no cutter graduate of Columbia Climate School. You're able to make an impact in various sectors and industries. I now also want to touch on financial aid and just reference that we have scholarships available. There are Columbia Climate School scholarships that you are automatically considered when applying to the MS in Climate or the MA Climate Society program. We also have external fellowships available. And in terms of federal and private loans, we work closely with our Student Financial Service Office. I can't emphasize enough, though, in terms of scholarships. If you are really interested in scholarships in particular, we have two different application deadlines. We have a January 15th deadline, and we also have a March 1st deadline. The January 15th deadline is the priority deadline. Decisions are released in March, and it's highly recommended if you're interested in climate school scholarships. In terms of climate school scholarships, they range anywhere from $10,000 to upwards of $35,000. and you are automatically considered for them when you apply by January 15th. There's no separate application. And just under 60% of our enrolling class for the fall 2024 received a scholarship, which we're very proud of, a merit scholarship. And every year we hope to beat that percentage, and we're hoping that's the case for fall 2025 through our really dynamic development office that's always raising funds each and every year. So I always recommend everybody joining us today, if you are interested in a graduate education journey at Columbia Climate School, if you're thinking about that MS in climate and that advanced certificate in disaster management, the deadline to take advantage of is absolutely January 15th, 2025. And both domestic as well as international students are automatically considered for those merit scholarships. In terms of the online application process, we have the resume, 2 letters of reference. 1 letter must be academic if you've been enrolled in an undergraduate university within the last 5 years. We also ask that you upload your unofficial college transcripts to the online application system. And those of you who are joining us, if you would be an international student, and specifically an international student where English is not your first language or was not the sole language of instruction in your undergraduate university, we would need an English language test. And the minimum score would be the 100 on the TOEFL, a 7.5 on the IELTS, or alternatively, we also take the Duolingo English test, and we would need a score of 135 on that. The reason we have minimum scores for English tests is because the language of instruction here at Columbia University is English. And you're interested in Columbia University because you are interested in a rigorous education. So we need to ensure that you have a strong English foundation to succeed. Finally, we have a statement of purpose for both the MA in Climate and Society and the MS in Climate program. What I want to emphasize is the statement of purpose should be up to 1,000 words in length. And in it, you will discuss your primary motivations for Columbia Climate School, the MA or the MS degree. And we also want you to touch on what your ultimate goals are and which climate core course you're most looking forward to. That's something very important because at Columbia Climate School, again, we want to emphasize that the climate core is a signature to a climate school education. So which core course are you most interested in? Is it climate justice? Maybe it's adaptation or mitigation. Maybe you're very excited about the dynamics course and understanding kind of the science behind the climate crisis. So make sure to highlight the climate core course you're most interested in. And finally, if you are selecting the MS in climate as your degree program of interest, and by the way, you can only apply to one program if it is the MS in climate, we also ask that you discuss which advanced certificate you are most drawn to, bearing in mind that you're not locked into that advanced certificate. But we do want to hear which advanced certificate. And for all of you joining today that will be applying, I'm certain it's going to be the application of the MS in climate and the advanced certificate in disaster management. So I'm already calling it. Jeff would be very disappointed otherwise. And that now brings me to my colleague, Laurel Zaima-Sheehy, Assistant Director of K-12 and Continuing Education, who's going to be talking about our professional learning opportunities here at Columbia Climate School. So maybe you're loving our graduate degrees, but perhaps you're not interested in necessarily transitioning your life to New York City or committing to a graduate program at this time. We have some really dynamic professional learning opportunities. So take it away, Laurel.
Thanks, Alfred. Hi, everyone. As Alfred said, my name is Laurel Zaima-Sheehy, and I lead the K-12 and continuing education at the Columbia Climate School. So today, I'm really excited to share about the Columbia professional learning opportunities that we offer. So these professional learning programs offer working professionals the chance to enhance and adapt their skills in the areas of climate and sustainability to empower them to advance their careers and really drive meaningful change. So the Columbia Climate School, as you heard from Alfred, is definitely committed to providing graduate programs, but we're also committed to offering transdisciplinary educational opportunities for all climate leaders, various audiences, various generations across diverse interests and backgrounds. And so these professional learning programs are meant for working professionals and adult learners who want to upskill themselves or develop new knowledge to advance their current career. They could even make a career switch or to support your lifelong learning aspirations. These opportunities allow professionals to explore new topics to further job-related interests without the long-term commitment of a degree program. So these programs offer the same level and rigor and quality as our degree programs, and they're taught by Columbia faculty, researchers, and practitioners. These learning opportunities deliver high caliber online or hybrid learning opportunities on a flexible schedule. These offerings will help participants develop an understanding of climate and sustainability challenges through the expertise of Columbia researchers and give everyone a chance to network with peers in various sectors. All these workshops are 15 hours in length and they're offered in English. Everything is recorded and participants will have access to these recordings and materials for up to 1 year. So there's no need to worry if you miss a session. We all know that you have a lot on your plate and prior engagements. You can always catch up asynchronously and schedule office hours with our experts to catch up on anything that you missed. There's no required readings or homework, and therefore no grades or transcripts. However, instructors will suggest readings, podcasts, videos, and supplementary resources for participants to take a deeper dive into that content. These are open enrollment opportunities, so there's no application. This is a non-credit opportunity, which means you're not a student of Columbia University through the participation of the program, but everyone receives a certificate of participation upon completing the workshop. The fees vary each semester for these professional learning opportunities based on the topic, whether it's entirely virtual or hybrid, and other variables. But all of it is listed on our website for that particular workshop offering. We do offer reduced rates for certain categories, including current students, those who are former participants of workshops, those working in government or NGO sectors, as well as alumni of Columbia University. Okay, Alfred, you can get to the next slide. So we've been running these workshops since 2020, and each semester we select a topic based on the interest of our past participants, the current demand from professionals based on market research, and the feedback that we receive from past workshops. So we have a variety of topics from experts spanning from various centers across the Columbia Climate School to ensure that we're providing opportunities for professionals across sectors to enhance their skills and have the ability to incorporate climate solutions into the workplace. So I wanted to give you a little snapshot of some of the workshop topics that we've held in the past. The first one is Toward Resilient Cities and Landscapes. This was led by Thaddeus Pawlowski and Joanna Lavecchio, and Kate Orff from the Center for Resilient Cities and Landscapes and the Graduate School for Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. And this particular workshop examined urban resilience through global case studies, exploring how cities confront crisis, adapt urban planning, and transform landscapes to build a more resilient future. The next workshop was the UN climate negotiations that we held in 2020. This was led by experts from the International Research Institute of Climate and Society. This workshop explored the global climate negotiation process, some of the achievements and challenges, and how these agreements shape economies, environments, and daily life. The next workshop, led by Art Lerner Lamb from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory, really examined how climate science can guide responsible investing, focus on environmental risk, carbon metrics, and balance between economic growth and global sustainability. We held a workshop called Collaborative Conservation Strategies for Biodiversity. This was led by Joshua Fisher from the Advanced Consortium on Cooperation, Conflict, and Complexity. This workshop explored the global biodiversity conservation challenges and strategies, focusing on collaborative actions and frameworks for effective stakeholder engagement in ecosystem and land use planning. The Climate Risk and the Law workshop was led by Romney Webb from the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law. This workshop examined the impact of advances in climate science on legal decisions related to climate change mitigation and adaptation, focusing on climate change detection, attribution, and modeling in recent litigation and policymaking. The Decarbonization Policies and Practices, led by Martin Dietrich Brauch from the Columbia Center for Sustainable Investing. This workshop explored the practical steps and interdisciplinary strategies needed to achieve decarbonization and meet the Paris Agreement and SDG goals. we had a very special session that focused on polar warming and ice sheet melt. This was led by a polar geophysicist, Dave Porter from Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory. And his research was brought into this workshop for people to understand polar science, but how changes in these icy places on Earth impact global ecosystems, infrastructure, and societies. We had a session called Strategic Climate Communications to Affect Change. This was led by Josh DiVincenzo from the National Center for Disaster Preparedness, and he taught participants and equipped them with the tools to improve climate communications using insights from psychology, cognitive science, and social neuroscience, tailored to drive meaningful impact to their unique workplace settings. And finally, the last topic that I wanted to share today is the Climate Finance Workshop. This workshop is led by Paul Denoon from the Columbia Climate School and Jerry Paul from the School of Professional Studies. And this workshop focuses on the challenges and solutions in mobilizing climate finance to achieve net zero. It covers different financial tools, actors, and the role of government and private sectors in transitioning global funding toward climate solutions. Now, this particular workshop received overwhelmingly positive feedback back when we first launched in the spring of 2024. And so many participants were interested in joining it again that we've decided to offer the Climate Finance Professional Learning Workshop for this fall. Registration is still open, so we can put the registration link in the chat if this is something that you're interested in joining. Actually, everyone tuning in today can receive 10% off toward the workshop fee. So you can reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat as well, but it's learn@climate.columbia.edu. And I can provide that discount code for registration. I will say the workshop starts on Monday, November 4th. So I'm only going to keep the registration open till Friday, just so we have enough time to onboard everyone and prepare them for the start on Monday. So if this is something you're interested in, I really encourage you to reach out sooner than later, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Phenomenal. Thank you so much, Laurel. And that brings us to the end of the session, although we're happy here for to remain for a couple minutes just for Q&A. But again, I'm Alfred Ayub, Senior Director of Admissions, and feel free to email me at admissions@climate.columbia.edu if you have any questions relating to our graduate degree program, especially, of course, our new MS in Climate program and the Advanced Certificate in Disaster Management. And as Laurel Zaiba-Sheehy can be reached at learn@climate.columbia.edu. Laurel manages our really dynamic professional learning opportunities. So by all means, feel free to reach out to us if you have questions relating to the degree programs or the professional learning programs. And I also want to say huge thank you for Professor Jeff Schlegelmilch for participating in today's event. That mind mapping exercise is phenomenal, and it's dangerous, Jeff, because now I'm going to want you in all my info sessions. I'm not joking, you know. So it was just too good. But let me just pause there, and does anybody feel free to use the Q&A function? Does anybody have any questions for myself, for Jeff, for Laurel about our degree programs or professional learning opportunities? So that does it. The mind mapping exercise was the most exciting. So we'll give it just one more minute just to confirm.
I know there were a few questions Damaris was answering in real time.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. We're an efficient bunch here.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Well, then with that said, thank you everybody so much for joining the session. Oh, hold on. Now we've got one. Don't want to. Oh, it was a thank you.
I'll take it.
That's brilliant. So thank you everybody for joining the session. Again, thank you so much to the Columbia Global Center Rio also for co-sponsoring the event with us. We really do appreciate it. And again, once again, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you, Jeff, most importantly, for the mind mapping exercise and the discussion on disaster management. So thank you everybody. Have a great evening.
Thank you all. See you in class.